Okay, this is a very special time. We're at the Navy Yard in the sail-off in the conference room for the United States Navy Band. And this is a very special occasion because we have here on camera our first captain of the program that started in the music program, and then those that have followed. And we also have the first commanding officer since the band became its own command, and the next CO to follow him. I know all these guys very, very well, but for the benefit of the camera and for those people that will watch this over the years, let's start with the one that's right in front of me. He's the oldest, and that's Captain Phillips. Tell us who you are and how you heard about this Navy musicians thing.
Well, I'm Captain Joe Phillips, actually William J. Phillips, but I've always gone with my middle name. When I was graduating from high school, I didn't have an awful lot of money, so I didn't anticipate going directly to college, and certainly my parents could not support that effort at that particular time. So I got wind of the fact that there were military bands, and there were some good things to happen in certain areas. And the first thing I found out about was the Air Force, and so I went to speak to the Air Force recruiter, and he said, told me about the Band of the West down in Lackland Air Force Base, and that he could get me into that band once I came into the service. And this was about 3 months before I was graduated from high school. So I went back to see him several times during that time frame, and lo and behold, one of my friends went up with me once, and as we were leaving the office, he had wandered over into the Navy recruiter's office, and he said, "Hey, Joe," he says, "did you know that the Navy has a school of music?" I says, "What? They've got a school of music?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "The recruiter told me. Chief Quartermaster said that there's a school of music in Washington, D.C. I said, "Washington, D.C.? I said, "Wow." So anyway, I started thinking about this, and next time up I went to speak to the Navy recruiter, and what he had to offer to me sounded a lot more interesting and exciting and everything concerned, because it was my idea to get as much of a musical education I could while I was in the Navy, and it was certainly not my thought at that particular time to make the Navy a career. Probably no one is when they first enlist, but nonetheless. So I was next to signing up to go in the Air Force, but I actually went in the Navy because my friend just happened into the Navy recruiter's office while I was talking to the Air Force recruiter. So it's funny how our lives channel, and these little crossroads that we come across that would totally change us, and just by virtue of that very small aspect of him just wandering away while I was talking to the Air Force recruiter. The rest is history, I guess. Here.
And what year was that?
1957. Right. April of 1957, thereabouts. And I graduated from high school May 27th. That was a Tuesday, and then on the following Sunday I got on a train, went to Raleigh and took a physical, and then came directly to Washington for an audition. First train I'd ever been on in my life. And I took the audition, and they said, "Okay, you've passed the audition. It says you can go back home for the summer and come on in this fall, or you could come in now if you wish." And I said, "Well," what the heck? Why go south when I could go? And they said that because that's when Bainbridge was still open, and that's where I went to boot camp up here near Port Deposit, Bainbridge, Maryland. So I just went straight on, and I didn't get back home till late August.
The amazing thing to me is how most of these stories follow such a very close parallel. When people used to catch a train or a bus or whatever it was to come to Washington, and they give them a dime to ride the streetcar down to, you know, the school to take an audition and all, and that's great. Let's go to the next youngest person here and come up this far at least, and that would be the Gambone guy.
Well, I'm Ralph Gambone, beloved leader of the United States Navy Band. And I served 38 years of service and retired in 1 July 2007. Originally came in to the Navy after college, 1969. Of course, Vietnam War was going on, and there were lots of opportunities, and I decided that the best thing was to audition for one of the special bands, see if I could go there. And as it turned out, of course, my dad was at the Naval Academy, Master Chief, retired Ralph Gambone, and went down and auditioned for the Naval Academy band, passed the audition, and went right into the Navy 2 weeks after I graduated from college. I was in boot camp.
You go to Great Lakes at Bainbridge?
No, Great Lakes.
Great Lakes.
Went to Great Lakes. Never been on a plane before. Flew out there, and came back to the academy, and I started my career there. My plan was to do my 4 years and get out and teach or play or whatever. And while I was there, I got my master's degree. I thought that was a big deal, and of course, if you're going to teach in college, you got to have.
So you didn't go over across the river to the school?
I did not. We didn't have to for special bands.
Yeah.
I went ran straight there to the academy, and really up until the time when I was getting ready to get out, I really hadn't thought about staying in, and it was Captain Phillips was the one that called me in his office one day and said, he said, have you thought about staying in the Navy, and maybe becoming an officer someday? And I went, no, not really. So he said, well, I think you should think about it. And I was like, why? And he said, well, you can come back and conduct this band one day, or, there's lots of opportunities, right? So I went home, and, I'm looking around and thinking, let's see, if I get out, I'll probably be like teaching elementary school or something. And looking at the options, and it certainly seemed like the Navy had a better option. So really, in the last 3 months of that first enlistment was when I decided to stay. And once I did stay, of course, I left the academy, went out to the fleet, and just started paying my dues and getting started. So that's how it happened for me.
Yeah. So Joe knows about the unit bands because you went out with Tom Adcock.
I did.
Yeah.
Tom was one of my early mentors.
Funny, I know all that stuff. Isn't it?
We had a fabulous band.
Yeah, it was.
And that band went on to some great things, like Kenny Malone, who's one of the most sought-after drummers in Nashville, and still is, I think, even to this day. And some other awfully good players that all went on to major bands and things of this nature themselves as players.
And that was when we had unit bands.
Exactly.
Tom and I were in the same advanced class.
You were?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't realize that you guys had
so
been in
we
the
were
same class.
we were pretty close that way. So let's catch the third guy here, and then we'll go back and come up on some things.
I am Captain George Thompson, Jr., the 12th leader of the United States Navy Band. The way I heard about this Navy music program is similar to what Joe's experience was. I initially went down to the recruiting station with every intention of joining the Marine Corps because I liked, like you, the uniforms, and I liked the discipline that they had and their military demeanor. I thought it was all very sharp, so I said I want to be like that. Well, the Marine recruiter wasn't there; the sailor was there, and he said we basically have the same programs, being sister service. So I had already had my mind made up that I was going to enlist. because I was living in Philadelphia in the inner city at the time. Had gotten married not too recently, and we had our first child. And it was not a good environment to raise a family, so I wanted to get out of that environment. So I said, I'll join the military. Well, wind up joining the Navy. In boot camp, I wound up in the same company as now retired Master Chief Jerry Ascione. One day I was in the choir room just sitting there entertaining myself playing piano, and in walks a recruit. He stands at the door listening to me play, and after I stop he comes over and introduces himself and says, "Hi, I'm Jerry Ascione. What are you doing after boot camp?" I said, "Well, I'm going to go into aviation administration." And "What about you?" He says, "Well, I'm a French horn player and I also play piano, and I'm going to the Naval Academy band." And my jaw about dropped to the floor at that point, because I had never heard a military band, never seen one, didn't know that military music existed at all.
Now, what year was this?
This was 1977.
Okay.
So he said, "Well, you ought to audition for the Navy music program." And I said, "Well, how do I do that?" He said, "Well, when we go through classification, tell the counselor, you know, that you want to look into getting an audition." So I did that. The counselor called over to Great Lakes and said, "Hey, got a guy over here who plays piano, says he wants to audition." And they said, "Send him over." So I went across the street to Great Lakes, took the audition, passed the audition, and after boot camp they sent me down to Norfolk to the School of Music, and that's how I got my start in the Navy music program.
So this is very interesting, because here we have three people that, one from the school across the river, one that didn't go to the school, and one that went to, I still call it the new school. It's been down there now for 40-some years, but I probably will always call it the new school. And the original plan here was to have Tony Mitchell here, because Tony went through the school when it was here in the yard before it moved across the river. Tell me about your days in school, Joe.
Well, like I say, well, you'll enjoy this story, Hawk, because this was one of the real reinforcers for me. The day I came to audition as a civilian, I went into one of the rehearsal rooms, and a big band was playing, big jazz band. And lo and behold, who was leading that band but yourself? And I've told you this story, you personally this story before, but I was genuinely impressed with everything that was going on, your rehearsal techniques and what you were doing with the band, and the way it was responding, and the way the band played. I was just knocked out, so there was no way that if I passed the audition, I wasn't ready to go straight in at that particular moment. So that's what I remember about this school. And then when I came back to the school after boot camp, Tom Adcock happened to be the gate guard the day that I came through the school.
Interesting.
And I had a trombone, my trombone with me, as opposed to using a Navy horn at that time. I brought my own horn. And he said, and apparently he was in charge of this special band that you're aware of. That Kenny was the drummer, and a lot of other very fine players. And he lost one of the trombone players to the Navy band. I think it may have been Stratton. I think it was Don Stratton was in that band for a while, and Don had auditioned for the Navy band. I'm almost, this connection we can check with Stratton on, but I'm almost sure this is the way
I don't think that's right, but go ahead.
Okay, well perhaps it isn't, but whoever it was had auditioned for one of the special bands, and he was looking for a player. So he pulled out one of the charts there that and I think it's funny how you remember things from this many years ago. It was Gower Street Gamble. I don't know if you ever remember hearing that chart, but anyway, he says sing the lines. So he didn't ask me to get my horn out, so I sang them, and then I didn't hear that much more from him for about a week, and then all of a sudden I was still in X division, as you call it, making coffee for the chiefs, and I was told Chief Adcock would like for you to be at a certain place and bring your horn. You know. Well, then I did basically audition in a way, and the specials that I had to audition were some of the old Huddleston, tough Huddleston, Howard Huddleston specials, and some of the other good writers of the era of the Navy specials. And when I finished, I said, I don't think I did real well. About a week later, he called me back and said, "What you gonna play with the band?" So I did, and then he hired me for that band. So the bottom line is, I never really went through the basic course. I went into that band from the beginning. I never went to harmony theory classes.
No
I did
kidding.
take a lesson.
Mhm.
Carson Sharp, who was the instructor at the time. And, but other than that, I really was not in a class per se. Although when the band was ready to ship out, they graduated me. But I never went through the regular curriculum of a specific class, although I do know my picture shows up in one of the class photos that I've seen around it.
Yeah, you pointed it out to me,
Well,
one of the ledger
you
lines.
pointed it out to me because I didn't realize that you had that. But
Yeah.
Nonetheless, like I say, the only thing that I did with that class was just be a member of it. I did not do the other elements with it. I wasn't part of a band specifically. I was just kind of in that band. And then finally we shipped out as a unit band to 194 to Norfolk and Comnav Airland.
Yeah.
And went on from there.
Well, that's interesting because during those days I was, rehearsing bands quite a bit, and I never knew that you weren't in the school per se. And a lot of people don't recall that. But the school has remained pretty much like it was here, thanks to Dutch Albert, who we just lost. Because when the school got ready to move, Dutch and Commander McMillan went over to the bureau, and they were talking about moving the school. And he, being the materiel officer, the idea was to scrap harmony and theory and ear training, and to scrap the reference library and a recording library, which we both know is just fantastic. And Dutch asked this question of the captain, Captain, if you were hiring a secretary, would you hire a secretary that just knew the keyboard of the typewriter? And the captain said, hell no. He says, you wouldn't require that she know sentence structure and how to prepare documents and all that? And he says, well, hell no. And Mac is frowning. And he says, well, that's what you're trying to do to the musicians if you scrap these programs. And he won that. And on the way back to the school, Dutch told me this, that Mac says, don't you ever disrespect a captain like that again. He says, you were talking to him like he didn't know what the devil he was talking about. And Dutch said to Mac, he says, you make my point. so that was hell. So the school, as you two ex-commanding officers of the school down there, recognized that those programs.